Izzy Awards ceremony on behalf of the Park School of Communication and the Park Center for Independent Media. I'm Jeff Cohen, the director of the center. I want to thank, where's Adelaide Park Gomer? I want to thank Adelaide because you want to know something? There would be no Park Center for Independent Media, and the whole independent media sector in our country would be much weaker if not for the Park Foundation and its president, Adelaide Park Gomer. People care about independent media, and that's why we've overflown this room and we've got the other room. I want to say hello to the people watching in the next building on live stream, and I want to remind everyone that when the ceremony is over, we are all mingling in the lobby, and we're having a book signing. The Izzy Award honors outstanding achievement in independent media. It's named after the legendary journalist I.F. Stone, whose independent newsletter battled racism, battled witch hunts, battled wars from 1953 to 1971. The added excitement tonight is that we are inducting the third ever person into the I.F. Stone Hall of Fame, and that's Amy Goodman. We are honored that this is the first stop on her 100-city book tour. Yeah. And so you are the first people who can put your hands on the book anywhere on the planet. The book is called Democracy Now! 20 Years Covering the Movements Changing America. So afterwards, we're mingling, we're doing a book signing. And I say that for the people in the overflow room. Now, what we've done tonight, this isn't just the 8th annual Izzy Award. What we've done tonight is build the biggest, best ceremony ever, and we're getting Mexico to pay for it. Now, sometimes you have to laugh to keep, thank you, Dennis Moynihan. Sometimes you have to laugh to keep from crying in an era with such an obscenely greedy mainstream media culture. Weeks ago, you probably heard that the head of CBS was cheering on Donald Trump. These are his words. The campaign may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS. The money's rolling in. Bring it on, Donald. Keep going. Donald's place in this election is a good thing, unquote. I want to assure you tonight that unlike cable TV news channels, we will not be interrupting our regularly scheduled proceedings to cut away to any podium that Donald Trump happens to be speaking at. And we will not pretend that that's breaking news, as they have done week after week after week on MSNBC and CNN, the allegedly liberal channel. Some of you know I used to be an on-air pundit at those cable news channels, and it was years ago. You know, it's much more difficult now because now you have to go on the air. I was watching it last night, and you have to explain how every time Bernie Sanders wins another state, he really lost. Now, it's not all bleak in the media culture. In fact, there's absolutely great news, and that is what we celebrate tonight, namely that the non-conglomerated independent media are growing and the corporate mainstream media are less dominant. It's not an accident that people under 35 are the most progressive age demographic in our country, and they're also the people who get more of their news and information from new media, independent media, social media. By contrast, What do you think the median age is of a viewer of Fox News Channel? It's almost 70, and a Bill O'Reilly viewer, more than 70. I speak for my other Izzy Award judges, Linda Jew and Bob McChesney, when I say that this was one of the best years ever for independent media. We poured over dozens of examples of powerful journalism, often deeper, clearer than mainstream media, on dozens of issues, from the environment to police misconduct, abuse of prisoners, war profiteering, political corruption, economic exploitation, mistreatment of immigrants. Without further ado, let's begin introducing you to tonight's Izzy Award winners.
New about climate change. Newly uncovered documents show the company's own scientists confirm global warming was occurring over 3 decades ago due to rising carbon emissions. Then the company covered it up, spending millions campaigning to stop the world from taking any action.
We found a trail of documents that go back to 1977. Exxon knew carbon dioxide was increasing in the atmosphere, that combustion of fossil fuels is driving it, and that this posed a threat to Exxon.
We'll speak with a former Exxon scientist and a reporter from the Pulitzer Prize-winning Inside Climate News.
Good evening. I'm Maura Stevens, the Associate Director of the Park Center for Independent Media, and I'm honored to introduce David Sassoon, the founder and publisher of Inside Climate News. He himself has been deeply involved for 25 years with public interest issues, human rights, cultural preservation, healthcare, education, and the environment. Many of you in the room tonight who have been involved in environmental and climate issues, and I know there are a lot of you, will remember reading the story that hit the front page of Inside Climate News last September 15th, exposing the depth of the duplicity of Exxon over its decades of denial of climate science. David will tell us tonight about the Exxon project, which was researched, reported, and written by Inside Climate News journalists Neela Banerjee, Jack Cushman, John Hassemeyer, and Lisa Song. It quickly spurred action by attorneys general of many states, and New York State AG Eric Schneiderman subpoenaed records from the corporation. I'm hoping that along the way, David will also share the story of how a very famous whistleblower of the 1970s Vietnam era referred to him as Babe Ruth. Please welcome David Sassoon, founder and publisher of Inside Climate News.
Thank you. A little photo op.
This is a little overwhelming. I've never walked into a room and been applauded. And it was really moving. It really was. I accept the applause on behalf of the reporters who can't be here. They're an incredible bunch, and you heard their names of the main reporters. Today you're going to get to hear from me, the publisher. So part of what I'm going to talk about is the Exxon story itself and how we got it and why it's important, and a lot of other things that need to happen around it. And also, I want to talk about nonprofit media from the perspective of somebody who is trying to build an institution that will last. I'm not trying to sound corporate, but we need to, we have a role to play, and we want to become the first permanent environmental newsroom that there ever has been. It's astonishing to think that one does not exist. Mm-hmm. So let me dive in here and see if these notes still make sense. In 1789, when a joint resolution of Congress was floated to proposing the amendments to the Constitution. There were 12, 10 survived into the Bill of Rights, including the First Amendment, and there was a preamble, and the preamble explained why we needed these Bill of Rights, including the First Amendment. And it said, it's in order to prevent the misconstruction of government or abuse of its powers. So if we take that very simple statement as the purpose of journalism, and think about the example of I.F. Stone and the Izzy Award and all of us who are being honored and others who work in that tradition, we have an idea of what it is we need to do. Anybody who has power, whether it's a government or a corporation acting as a government, is going to want to preserve its power and is going to want to abuse it. It's the way things go. So there's this tension that we have to understand, and the corporate media is being pulled because they are so large and they have their interests and they need their access to government and so on. So the way I look at what we need to do is pull the corporate media in this direction. And it's part of the struggle we face in this arena. And as somebody said earlier today, one of the things we need to do is access their means of distribution, because it's very, very powerful. There was a calculation made that Donald Trump has gotten $1.9 billion in free media. We could operate for 2,000 years with that budget, okay? So let me tell you the story of this Exxon series. It started when I went to a conference, and by chance I happened to meet Daniel Ellsberg, who was at the conference. And we got to talking. Basically, his message was, there are people of conscience in every corporation, everywhere you look. And you cannot wait for the whistleblowers to come to you. You need to go find the whistleblowers. And you need to go find them and find out what those companies knew and when they knew it. And the light bulbs went off in my head. That's all he really needed to say. A couple of months later, when our team was meeting for our annual retreat, I pitched the staff on this idea. We need to go find out what the oil companies knew and when they knew it. Because we know what they've been doing. That part of the story is documented, right? The denial they have been involved in. So the pitch fell flat. And Neela wrote up this account, how we got the story. You can read it. But we kept talking about it, and I was able to convince the team that we can get started. They thought, well, everybody knows that story, kind of. What's the news in it? And somebody else said, well, how are we going to do that? You know, we're tiny, we're 12. How are we going to penetrate these largest corporations in the world? We had a lead. We knew that BP in the late 90s had broken away from the church, as they called it, and said we have to do something about climate change. And Lord Browne, when he announced that, said his own scientists had come to him and told him, why are we adopting a position of intellectual dishonesty? So his own scientists. So we knew that these corporations that are based on good science, they can't do their business without incredible science, must have been having these conversations. So we started, well, BP turned out to be a dead end for us, and we hit a lot of dead ends. But eventually, Dave Hassmeyer turned over a lead that showed that Exxon had been doing climate research with the federal government in the early 80s. So that was like the first little thread that we were able to pull on. And little by little, the trail kept leading back to Exxon. We didn't really think we were going there, but that's where we ended up. So eventually, and I can't really say much more than this, we got a lot of documents. And these were incredible documents. We could not believe what we were reading, and a lot of them have been published. Then another phase of work began. We had to understand them. We had to reconstruct 40 years of history, really, and we needed to find sources who would talk to us and make sure